Crossing borders, the journey to the unknown. A dusty, dimly lit truck crossing the Mexican desert at night. The truck's engine roars as the tires crunch over the rough terrain. In the back, a group of tired, desperate men huddle together, some of them whispering, others staring at the endless horizon. Diego is among them, sitting by the truck's corner, his rugged face full of resolve. He pulls out a crumpled photograph of his wife, Katerina, and their children, Miguel and Sofia. Diego, I told Katerina I would return, that I would make things better for us. But how could she understand? The struggles are never told in stories. They are felt in every step, every drop of sweat. A sudden bump shakes the truck. Everyone looks alarmed. The border patrol lights flicker in the distance. A tense silence falls over the group. Man in the group. La patrulla! Vámonos rápido! The patrol. Let's go quickly. Diego looks at the photo again, then takes a deep breath. He grabs his bag, and with a hard look of determination, he joins the others in scrambling off the truck. They sprint into the night, the lights of the border patrol growing closer. Diego, you have to run when you don't know where you're going. Just keep moving, keep breathing for them. They dive into the nearby brush, the sound of the truck's engine fading as the patrol vehicles roar past. Diego looks back for a moment, then continues forward, pushing through the dark landscape. The early morning sun casts a warm glow over a suburban street in America, a contrast to the desert Diego left behind. Diego is standing in front of a large, well-maintained house. A luxury car sits in the driveway. He takes a deep breath before walking toward the front door, holding his toolbox. Softly in Spanish. Este es el comienzo de algo, o el fin de todo. This is the beginning of something, or the end of everything. He rings the doorbell. Jennifer, a wealthy American woman in her 50s, answers the door with an air of impatience. Her clothes are sophisticated, but she wears an expression of mild annoyance. Jennifer. Finally, you're late, and I don't have time for delays. Diego, dressed in simple work clothes, stands tall. He looks at her briefly, noting her beauty and sharp demeanor. Lo siento, ma'am, I had some trouble on the way here. Sorry, ma'am, gesturing with a flick of her wrist. Just fix the sink, it's upstairs. Don't take all day. Diego nods and walks past her, but not without feeling her gaze linger on him. She watches him as he heads upstairs to the bathroom, trying to hide her curiosity. The bathroom upstairs, where Diego is fixing the sink. Jennifer leans in the doorway, observing him with interest. Diego crouches, working on the pipes under the sink. He doesn't notice Jennifer watching him until she speaks. So, Diego, where are you really from? You don't look like a plumber. Diego, glancing up. Mexico. Guerrero. It's a small town. He avoids her gaze. Ah, Mexico. How charming. A hardworking man from humble beginnings. Her voice softens with a hint of admiration. Must be quite the change to be here, fixing sinks for a living, huh? Diego shrugs, trying to stay focused on his work. I work hard for my family. That's all that matters. Well, I'm sure you have other skills too. She steps closer. How does someone like you get into this line of work? Diego, glancing at her. I just do what I can. I need to send money home for my wife and kids. Jennifer looks at him thoughtfully, intrigued by his honesty. There's a pause before she speaks again. Well, you're definitely more interesting than the usual handyman. I'll leave you to it. She turns and walks away, but Diego can't shake the feeling that she's interested. His thoughts linger on her presence, but he pushes them aside, focusing on finishing the job. The luxurious dining room later that evening. Jennifer invites Diego to stay for a late dinner, but Diego hesitates, unsure. She insists, and they sit together at a candlelit table. Jennifer pours wine for them both. Jennifer, with a playful grin, You deserve a break, Diego. You've been working all day. Please sit. Enjoy. Diego, still hesitant, finally sits down. He picks up his glass of wine, clearly out of place in the elegant setting. Jennifer watches him, her eyes never leaving his. Jennifer, so tell me more about Guerrero. Is it as beautiful as you are? Diego, smiling politely, his Spanish accent noticeable. Guerrero is beautiful, yes, but life there is not easy. I worked hard just to put food on the table. I've done everything, worked the fields, built houses, all for my family. Jennifer, leaning in slightly. You've had a hard life, Diego. Her tone softens, the flirtation returning. Tell me, what would you do if you could have anything? If money wasn't a problem? Thinking about his family. I would bring my family here, give them everything they need, a better life. Jennifer looks at him for a moment, her expression unreadable. She suddenly reaches out and touches his hand gently. Jennifer, maybe you can have that. Maybe you deserve more than just fixing sinks for a living. Diego freezes at her touch. Their eyes lock, and there's a moment of tension in the air. He pulls his hand back slightly. Diego, I should be going. Thank you for the dinner. Jennifer, softly, almost teasing. Maybe you're right, but Diego, you don't have to be in such a rush. The night is still young. She watches him leave with a knowing smile. Diego exits, his mind racing with thoughts of his family back home and Jennifer's unexpected allure. Outside Jennifer's mansion, under the starlit sky, Diego walks out of the front gate, the cool night air greeting him. He stops for a moment, looking at the mansion behind him. His thoughts are clouded with conflicting emotions. His love for his wife, his desire for a better life, and the powerful, confusing attraction he feels toward Jennifer. I didn't come here for this, but sometimes life throws you things you didn't expect. Jennifer, she's nothing like Katerina, but she could help me. She could give us a future. But at what cost? He takes a deep breath, and with one last look at the mansion, he walks away. Jennifer's mansion, the sun is setting, casting an orange hue across the sprawling garden. Diego pulls up to Jennifer's mansion in a battered truck. It's a quiet, peaceful evening, the kind that feels like it's too perfect to be real. Diego steps out, a bit more dressed up than usual. He's nervous. He wipes his brow and heads to the door, his boots crunching on the gravel pathway. He rings the doorbell. Jennifer answers, this time with a smile, no longer the stern, impatient woman he first met. Jennifer, well, look at you. A little more polished today. I like it. I wasn't sure what to wear, but thank you. Smiling warmly, almost flirtatiously. You look fine. Come in, come in. I've made dinner for us. Thank you for the invitation. I don't want to trouble you. Jennifer, it's no trouble, Diego. Besides, you've been working so hard. You deserve a little break, don't you think? Diego enters the house, his eyes scanning the luxurious interior once again. Jennifer leads him to the dining area where a lavish meal is laid out. A candlelit table is set for two. Diego, looking around, impressed. This is beautiful. You live like this every day? Jennifer, yes, I do. It's part of the business. Owning a perfume company has its perks. Diego sits down, unsure what to say next. Jennifer pours 2 glasses of wine, one for him and one for herself. She sits opposite him, her eyes never leaving his. So, Diego, tell me about your family again. I'm curious. What's it like in Guerrero? What made you leave? Diego, pausing, then speaking from the heart. Life is hard there. My wife, Katerina, and I have been together since we were young. We had nothing, just hope, and our kids, Miguel and Sofia. I wanted to give them more, but sometimes, no matter how hard you try, it's never enough. So I came here, hoping for a better future. Sounds like a story I've heard 1,000 times, but you're different. I can see it. You don't just want success for yourself, you want it for your family. That's rare. Diego, I've done whatever I could in Mexico. Worked in fields, built houses, fixed things, but there was always something missing. I needed a change. And now you're here, with me. She leans back, looking at him with a contemplative gaze. Diego shifts uncomfortably, but keeps his eyes on his plate. Yes, but I don't want to take advantage of your kindness, Jennifer. You're not taking advantage, Diego. You're just accepting an offer. Nothing more, nothing less. She picks up her glass of wine and clinks it against his. Jennifer, with a seductive to new beginnings. Diego smiles awkwardly, but returns the toast. He's still uneasy about the situation, but something in Jennifer's eyes tells him she's determined to get closer. The living room of Jennifer's mansion after dinner. They finish their meal and head into the living room. The room is opulent, with expensive furniture and artwork on the walls. Diego sits on the couch, his legs stretched out, while Jennifer walks over to the window, looking out at the garden. The room is dimly lit, the soft glow of the chandelier casting shadows on their faces. Jennifer, turning to face him. You know, Diego, I've never met anyone quite like you. You're not like the other men I've known. How do you mean? You don't play games. You're not trying to impress me with your money or your status. You're just you. And that's refreshing. I don't know how to impress anyone. I just do what I can. I've learned that's all I can offer. And that's enough for me. She's standing just inches away now. Their faces are close. Diego's breath catches in his throat as Jennifer slowly reaches out to touch his arm. You're different, Diego. You're the kind of man I've been searching for. Diego's heart races. He knows this is dangerous, but the pull is irresistible. He leans in, their lips meeting in a slow, hesitant kiss. For a moment, everything feels like it's standing still. When they pull away, there's an undeniable tension in the air. Jennifer, do you feel it too? Diego, nodding. I feel something, but I don't want to hurt my family. Jennifer, gently, with a sly smile. Sometimes, Diego, you have to let go of the past to move forward. She kisses him again, this time more urgently. Diego hesitates, but then, against his better judgment, he gives in. Late at night, Diego stands by the window, staring out at the city lights while Jennifer watches him from the couch. There's a silence in the room that hangs heavy. Jennifer. So tell me, Diego, what's stopping you? Why don't you want to take a chance with me? Diego runs his fingers through his hair, conflicted. I came here for one reason, to help my family, to give them a future. I didn't think I would end up here with you. Jennifer turning and walking toward him. I know. I understand. But you don't have to choose between me and your family. You can have both. Diego turns to face her, his expression filled with pain. But you don't understand. My family is everything to me. Katerina, she's waiting for me. I can turn my back on her. Softly, almost pleading. Then why are you here, Diego? Why come to me if you don't want to be with me? Diego looks at her, unsure. He opens his mouth to speak, but nothing comes out. Jennifer, seeing his hesitation, steps closer and takes his hand. I just want you, Diego. Is that so wrong? Diego looks at her hand, then into her eyes. There's a brief moment of silence before he pulls away gently. I need to go. I have to focus on what's important. Jennifer, almost hurt. Of course, but just know I'll always be here. Diego's struggle outside Jennifer's mansion under the moonlight. Diego stands outside the gates of Jennifer's mansion, looking up at the night sky. He takes a deep breath, conflicted by his emotions. Diego, I never thought it would be like this. I came here to escape poverty, but now I'm caught in a web I don't know how to get out of. He looks at his phone, then scrolls through his messages. He sees a text from Katerina asking when he'll be coming home. His heart aches as he types a quick reply. Katerina, I'm sorry. I don't know what I'm doing, but I promise I will return. I'll fix everything. He hits send and stands there for a moment longer, staring at the phone screen. His thoughts are torn between Jennifer and his family, the weight of his choices pulling him in two directions. In Jennifer's mansion, late afternoon, sunlight spills through the large windows of the living room. Diego is adjusting the pipes under the sink in the kitchen, his back to Jennifer, who is sitting at the kitchen island sipping a glass of wine. So, Diego, tell me, what's a man like you doing in a place like this? I mean, you're clearly not from around here. It must have been tough for you to leave Mexico behind. Diego hesitates, wiping his hands on a rag before straightening up and turning to face her. There's a visible hesitation in his eyes as he decides whether or not to open up. It was difficult. My family is everything. I couldn't stay in Guerrero. There's no work, no future there. I wanted something better for my kids, for Katerina. I had to come here. Jennifer watches him closely, sensing the sincerity in his words. She smiles, leaning back in her chair, intrigued. I get it. I've worked hard to get where I am, but it's not the same, is it? I mean, the people here have everything. But what does it matter if you're stuck in the same place your whole life, right? She stands and walks toward him, pouring herself another glass of wine. The sound of the glass filling breaks the tension in the room. Jennifer, tell me, Diego, does it ever get lonely? You know, being so far from your family. No wife to share your day with. No children to come home to. Does it feel like you're always running? Diego looks down at the floor for a moment, unsure how to respond. He glances up at Jennifer, meeting her eyes, but there's a sense of guardedness in his gaze. It's lonely, yes, but I can't go back now. Not until I can make sure they have a better life. I won't fail them. Jennifer steps closer, her tone shifting to something more personal, more intimate. I think you're doing the right thing, but you don't have to be alone, Diego. You've got me now. I can help you. I have the resources. I have everything. You don't have to be alone in this. Diego, now visibly uncomfortable, shifts his weight. The warmth in her voice doesn't escape him, but he feels the weight of his vows back home. Diego, I appreciate your kindness, Jennifer, but my heart belongs to my family, to Katerina. Jennifer smiles, but there's a hint of challenge in her eyes. Oh, come on. You don't really believe that, do you? You think you can just keep living this way forever? What about you, Diego? What do you want? Diego's heart races as he glances down at his hands, trying to calm himself. His mind flashes to his family back home, but there's something about Jennifer that tugs at him. She has power. She has everything he's ever dreamed of, but he knows this isn't about love. It's about survival. Diego, calmly but firmly, I want a better future for them. That's all. That's why I'm here. Jennifer steps closer, her voice lowering as if to draw him in. Then let me help you. Let me be the one who gives you that future. Diego looks at her, his gaze intense but conflicted. He knows this is dangerous territory, but the temptation of her offer looms large. Later that evening, Diego is sitting alone on the balcony overlooking the vast city. The sky is a deep orange as the sun sets behind the skyscrapers. He stares into the distance, lost in thought. Jennifer appears behind him, her presence soft but undeniable. She steps out and stands beside him, her heels clicking on the floor. Jennifer, why do you look so far away? The world's right here, and it's yours for the taking. Diego turns his head slowly to look at her, his face a mix of uncertainty and longing. Diego, I'm not here for the world, Jennifer. I'm here for my family. That's all. Jennifer reaches out, her fingers grazing his arm, a playful smirk on her lips. Well, sometimes a man needs more than just family. He needs someone who understands him, someone who can make things easier. Diego looks at her, his defenses slowly crumbling. He's a man in a foreign land, struggling to hold on to his principles. But Jennifer's words cut through the tension in his heart. He takes a deep breath, deciding to confront the desires he's been trying to push aside. Diego, I don't know if this is right, Jennifer, but right now, I can't say no. Jennifer smiles triumphantly, her voice low and seductive. Then don't say no. Just be with me. Let me help you, Diego. She steps even closer, her body inches away from his. Her perfume fills the air, intoxicating him. She leans in slightly, her lips brushing against his ear. You've been working so hard. You deserve this. Let go, just for tonight. For a moment, Diego's thoughts flicker to his family, but then his body betrays him. He pulls her toward him, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that seals his fate. The next morning, Diego wakes up in Jennifer's bed, the warmth of the sheets enveloping him. The light of the early morning shines through the windows, casting long shadows across the room. He looks over at Jennifer, still asleep beside him, her face peaceful. He quietly gets out of bed, putting on his clothes. His thoughts are a swirl of guilt and temptation. He knows this was never supposed to happen, but it did. As he walks out of her bedroom, he pauses at the door, staring at her one last time. His hand lingers on the doorframe, but then he shakes his head, trying to clear the fog in his mind. Diego, to himself, what have I done? He leaves, knowing he has crossed a line he can't uncross, and Jennifer will be expecting more from him. Diego arriving at Jennifer's mansion again. Early evening. The sun is just starting to set, casting a golden hue over the luxurious home. The sound of birds chirping fills the air. Diego steps out of his truck, looking a bit uneasy. He has just finished a long day of work, his clothes dirty from plumbing repairs at another home. Jennifer, dressed in a glamorous silk dress, opens the door just as Diego is about to knock. She smiles warmly, her eyes glinting with excitement. Jennifer. Diego, you're early today. I like it. Diego smiles nervously, unsure of what to expect. He's used to their encounters being professional, but the tension from last time still lingers between them. Diego, just finished early, ma'am. I didn't want to keep you waiting. Well, I'm glad you're here. I need your help with something personal. She steps aside to let him in, closing the door behind him. The interior of the mansion is dimly lit with candles, giving the space an intimate feel. The air is heavy with the scent of her perfume, a mix of vanilla and jasmine, which seems to envelop the room. Diego, what do you need help with? Jennifer, walking toward the dining area. Come, let's talk. I've prepared dinner for us. Diego follows her into the elegant dining room, where the table is set with fine china and flickering candles. Jennifer takes a seat at the head of the table, motioning for him to sit across from her. Diego hesitates for a moment before pulling out the chair. Please, sit. You've worked hard today. You deserve something nice. Diego sits down, but there's an awkwardness in the air as they both take in the situation. Jennifer pours him a glass of wine, her movements slow and deliberate. Jennifer, looking at him seductively. You've been so kind, Diego, so patient with me. I think it's time I show you my appreciation. She leans forward, her hand brushing his as she passes him the glass of wine. Her touch lingers for a moment, and Diego's heart races. He looks into her eyes, unsure if this is a good idea, but the temptation is undeniable. Diego, Jennifer, I'm not sure this is a good idea. I don't want to complicate things. Jennifer, hurling softly. Why complicate things when we can enjoy the moment, Diego? You've been so focused on your family, on the future. But what about right now? You deserve to feel good. You deserve to be happy. She stands up slowly, walking around the table to where Diego is sitting. The tension in the room is palpable as she stands behind him, her fingers brushing against his shoulders. She leans down, her lips grazing his ear. Jennifer, you don't have to think about tomorrow, Diego. Just tonight. Let me give you a taste of what your future could be. Diego breathes in sharply, his body betraying him. He's torn, but he can't deny the allure of Jennifer's offer. The way she looks at him, the way she makes him feel, he feels both guilty and exhilarated. Diego, I can't say no. Jennifer smiles triumphantly, running her fingers through his hair before slowly kissing his cheek. She walks toward the living room, beckoning him with a glance. Diego follows, his heart pounding in his chest. The large living room. The soft glow of the fireplace casts flickering shadows across the room, and the sound of the crackling fire fills the air. Jennifer is standing by the fireplace, watching Diego intently as he enters the room. She walks toward him slowly, her movements graceful, almost predatory. I want you to forget everything, Diego. Forget the rules. Forget the guilt. Just be with me. Diego takes a deep breath, his mind racing. His body is conflicted, but he can't stop himself. He steps closer to Jennifer, his hand reaching out toward her. She grabs it, pulling him in for a kiss. Their lips meet in a fiery kiss, full of tension and desire. For a moment, Diego is lost in the feeling. His mind flashes to his wife, Katerina, and their children back home in Mexico, but Jennifer's touch is all-consuming. He's caught between guilt and longing. Jennifer pulls away slightly, her eyes locking onto his. Just this once, Diego. Let yourself go. Diego's heart races as he leans in again, his hands moving to her waist. The passion between them ignites as they kiss again, this time with more urgency. The room feels smaller, the air heavier. There's no turning back now. The next morning, Diego wakes up in Jennifer's bed, his head throbbing slightly from the wine. The sun is rising, casting a soft glow across the room. He turns to look at Jennifer, who is still asleep beside him. Her hair is tousled, her face peaceful. Diego sits up, the sheets falling away from him. He runs a hand through his hair, staring at the floor. His mind is a whirlwind of emotions. Guilt, shame, and a strange sense of relief. He stands up and grabs his clothes from the floor, slipping into them quietly. As he pulls on his shirt, he looks back at Jennifer, unsure of what to do next. Diego, to himself quietly, what have I done? I need to go home. I need to talk to Katerina. He walks toward the door, pausing one last time to glance at Jennifer, still sleeping peacefully. He doesn't want to leave, but he knows he has to. He steps outside into the cool morning air, his thoughts filled with conflict. Katerina's dangerous journey. In a small, modest home in Guerrero, Mexico. Katerina, a woman in her early 30s, is packing a bag frantically. Her eyes are filled with determination, but there's also an underlying fear. The small, humble house she shares with her children is dimly lit by a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. The walls are bare, the furniture simple and worn. Her two children, Miguel and Sofia, are playing quietly in the corner, unaware of the storm that's brewing. Katerina, to herself softly while packing, "Esto es por ellos, this is for them." She takes a deep breath, her heart pounding as she looks at the pictures of her children and Diego pinned to the wall. Her mind drifts back to the promises Diego had made before he left for the US. Promises of a better life, of bringing them all to America. But months have passed since then, and there's been no word from him. Desperate and scared, Katerina knows that if she wants a better life for her children, she will have to take matters into her own hands. Katerina walking through the dusty streets of Guerrero, looking over her shoulder to make sure she's not being followed. She meets with a man in a dimly lit alley. His face is shadowed, but there's something cold and calculating about him. He holds out a small package to her, money and an envelope with a map inside. Man, in Spanish. "Este es tu pasaje, te llevaré hasta el cruce." This is your ticket, I'll get you to the crossing. Kat nervously, but with resolve. "Es seguro? Puedo confiar en ti? Is it safe? Can I trust you?" Man with a dismissive wave. "Solo sigue las instrucciones. Y no mires atrás." Katerina hesitates for a moment, clutching the envelope tightly before walking away. The man watches her leave, a flicker of something dangerous in his eyes. Katerina in the back of a truck, squished between other migrants, all of them desperate for a chance at a better life in the US. The truck bumps and jolts over rocky terrain, its engine roaring in the silence of the night. The air is thick with the stench of sweat and fear. Some of the people are crying quietly, others are lost in their own thoughts. Katerina clutches her bag, the envelope with the map still tucked inside. Katerina, whispering to herself, eyes closed, "Solo por mis hijos, only for my children." She thinks of Miguel and Sofia, the only reason she's doing this. Her heart aches with fear, but she pushes the emotions down, focusing only on survival. Hours pass, and the truck finally stops. The night air is cold as the migrants are herded out. Katerina follows the instructions from the map, walking through dark desert trails, the hot sun just beginning to rise over the horizon. The journey is grueling, exhausting, and treacherous, but she doesn't stop. She can't stop. Cut to a scene in the desert. Katerina stumbles, exhausted, her skin burned by the sun and her feet sore from the endless walking. The map leads her to a small, dilapidated shack, the final stop before the border. The man who had given her the map is waiting there, his expression impatient. Man, irritated, in Spanish, "Rápido, tienes que cruzar ya." Quickly, you need to cross now. Katerina nods, her body shaking with exhaustion, but her resolve falters. She's come this far. She can't back down now. The man leads her to a narrow, hidden path through the desert, and they sneak under the cover of night. As they approach the border, Katerina's heart races. She hears the faint sound of helicopters above and the ominous growl of Border Patrol trucks in the distance. But the man gestures for her to keep going, his eyes scanning the horizon nervously. Man, hushed. "No mires atrás. Corre, don't look back. Run." Katerina takes off running, her breath ragged in her chest as she pushes her body past its limits. The pain in her legs, the heat of the desert, the fear of being caught, all of it blurs into the background as she focuses on one thing: crossing that border. The Border Patrol truck draws closer, its lights flashing in the distance. She doesn't stop running. She can't. Katerina on the other side of the border, her body collapsed on the ground, the weight of the journey finally catching up to her. She's made it. But at what cost? The borderlands are quiet now, and the only sounds are the distant calls of coyotes and the wind. Katerina pulls herself to her feet, looking around at the vast emptiness. Her heart still pounds in her chest, but a sense of triumph fills her. She's here. She's in America. Katerina's unexpected arrival at Jennifer's mansion. Later, Katerina arrives at Jennifer's mansion. She's dirty, exhausted, and desperate, but she can't afford to look weak. She's come all this way for Diego, and she knows that she has to find him. Katerina's arrival at Jennifer's mansion. The scene opens with Katerina, bruised and exhausted from her long journey, standing in front of Jennifer's grand mansion. She looks up at the towering gates, a symbol of everything that Diego had promised her, a future, a life, away from the struggles of Guerrero. But the mansion also feels alien to her, intimidating and vast. She hesitates for a moment before gathering the last of her strength. Katerina approaches the front gate. A security guard, noticing her, steps forward. She's unkempt, her clothes stained from the journey, her face pale from exhaustion. Katerina nervously, in broken English, "Excuse me, I'm looking for Diego." "Diego Lopez. Is he here?" The guard eyes her suspiciously, his hand resting on the radio. He seems to hesitate, then speaks into the radio. "Security guard. Someone's here asking about Diego Lopez. Says she's his wife." The guard looks at Katerina again, his expression unreadable. "You wait here." Katerina nods, her heart racing. She can't believe she's so close. After everything she endured, she's finally here. She hopes that Diego will be able to explain everything, that he will help her. She waits for what feels like an eternity, the stillness of the place unnerving her. The massive door to the mansion opens, and Jennifer walks out. Her face shows disbelief at the sight of Katerina. She is impeccably dressed, her blonde hair styled perfectly. Her elegance contrasts sharply with Katerina's worn appearance. Jennifer looks Katerina up and down, clearly confused and unsure of what to make of her. Jennifer, coldly with a raised eyebrow. "Who are you?" Katerina, steadily, her voice shaky. "I'm Katerina, Diego's wife. He promised me that we'd be here together, that we'd start a new life." Jennifer's eyes widen in shock. She stands there for a moment, speechless, processing what Katerina has just said. A mixture of emotions crosses her face: surprise, confusion, and perhaps a little jealousy. Jennifer, coldly, still in disbelief. "Diego's wife? He never mentioned you." Katerina looks around, the weight of the words sinking in. She's not sure what she expected, but this wasn't it. The grand mansion, the opulence, the overwhelming sense of unfamiliarity. It feels like a world away from the life she once knew in Guerrero. Voice rising. "He promised me. He said we'd be together. He said he was going to bring me here. I don't understand. Why didn't he tell me about you?" Jennifer, still processing, seems to look Katerina up and down. Her tone shifts, no longer cold, but more calculating, almost amused. "You don't know what you're getting yourself into. Diego and we're something different. You think he still cares about you, don't you? You think he's just going to drop everything and come back to you? He's not who you think he is." Katerina's chest tightens. She steps forward, her eyes burning with determination. This is not the time for weakness. Katerina with conviction. "I don't care about your games. Diego promised me. I'm here for my family. I will not let anyone take that away from me." Jennifer glares at her, but something shifts in her expression. There's a flicker of something. Regret? Annoyance? She narrows her eyes as if assessing the threat Katerina poses. "Jennifer, you'll have to speak to Diego. He's the one you need to convince. But let me warn you, it's not going to be as simple as you think." Katerina stands there, her fists clenched, the weight of Jennifer's words hanging heavily in the air. She feels a rising tide of anger. Anger not just at Jennifer, but at Diego for what he's put her through. But she will not back down. She's come this far for her children, for her family. Katerina, whispering to herself almost defiantly, "Por mi familia, for my family." Diego's arrival. Diego pulls up to Jennifer's mansion, his truck rumbling on the long driveway. He notices Katerina standing in front of the grand door, her posture tense, and Jennifer hovering near the entrance with a guarded look on her face. Diego's heart skips a beat. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't even considered the possibility that Katerina would come all this way to find him. His breath catches in his throat, but he quickly masks his surprise with a practiced calm. As Diego steps out of the truck, Jennifer looks at him with a mix of curiosity and annoyance. "Jennifer, explain this, Diego. Who is she?" Diego looks over at Katerina, his heart sinking as the reality of the situation hits him. His marriage, his promise to Katerina, the life he's built here with Jennifer, it all feels like it's about to come crashing down. "She's Katerina. My wife. I didn't know she would come here." The tension thickens as Katerina steps forward, her voice trembling but strong. You promised, Diego. You promised you'd bring us here. You promised me a life away from all of this. And now look at you, living in this mansion with her. Jennifer takes a step closer, her voice laced with disdain. So you think you can just walk in here and reclaim him? He's mine now, honey. You should have thought about that before you let him cross the border. Katerina's eyes flare with anger. She strides toward Jennifer, getting in her face. You think you can just steal him from me? He's my husband, not your toy. I'll fight for my family. Diego steps in, pushing between the two women, trying to de-escalate the situation, his voice panicked. Please, stop. Both of you. We need to figure this out calmly. Katerina and Jennifer continue to exchange heated words, each woman believing she has the right to Diego's heart. The emotions boil over as they come face to face, the tension palpable. Later that night, as the emotional heat of the confrontation dies down, Diego sits alone in his truck in the mansion's parking lot. He runs a hand over his face, torn between the woman he left behind in Mexico and the woman he's grown close to here in America. As the night deepens, the mansion's lights glow dimly in the distance. Diego knows that he's on the brink of losing everything. His family, his freedom, his happiness. The night has fallen, and the mansion is quiet, but the tension in the air is palpable. Diego walks through the manicured garden, his footsteps heavy with guilt. He can hear the soft rustle of leaves, but his mind is consumed with thoughts of Katerina's desperate plea and Jennifer's cold response. Inside, Jennifer lounges in the grand living room, a glass of wine in hand, staring at the fire burning in the hearth. Her face is an unreadable mask, but her clenched jaw betrays her emotions. She tries to keep calm, but the sight of Katerina, a woman from Diego's past, standing in her world, threatens everything she's worked to build. Diego enters the room, his eyes tired. He glances at Jennifer, but she doesn't meet his gaze. Instead, she swirls the wine in her glass, her fingers delicate but tense. Diego, quietly. Jennifer, we need to talk. Jennifer doesn't look at him but takes a sip of her wine, the silence hanging between them. There's nothing left to talk about, Diego. I'm not going to be second place. You should have told me the truth. I don't care about your past, but you dragged me into your lies. Diego's face tightens with frustration, but he tries to remain calm. He knows Jennifer is hurt, but he also knows Katerina deserves answers. He can feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. I never meant to hurt you, but Katerina, she's my wife. I couldn't just abandon her. Jennifer cutting him off. No, Diego, you abandoned me. You lied to my face, pretending everything was fine while you had a family back home. You've been playing both sides, and I won't be anyone's second choice. She stands abruptly, pacing across the room, her heels clicking against the floor. Diego watches her, his heart sinking as he realizes how deep this betrayal goes. Jennifer, you think you can just waltz in here with your wife, expecting me to accept it? You're a fool if you think I'll let this happen without consequences. Diego takes a deep breath, trying to steady himself. His frustration turns into anger, but he doesn't want to fight with her. Not like this. Diego, I don't want to lose you, Jennifer, but I can't walk away from my family. I promised Katerina that we would have a life here together. Jennifer, eyes flashing with fury. So what? You expect me to just step aside and let you have both lives? You think I'm some fool? There's a long pause as the tension in the room thickens. Then Jennifer walks over to the door and opens it, her voice cold but final. If you want to be with her, then go. I don't need a man who lies to me. Leave now, Diego. I'm done. Diego looks at her, his heart shattering at the finality in her words. He steps toward her, but she slams the door in his face before he can say another word. He stands there, frozen in place for a moment, his mind reeling. The woman he's been trying to build a life with is done with him, and the woman he's promised a future to is waiting for him. Meanwhile, Katerina stands outside, pacing back and forth in the yard. She's been watching from the window, seeing the heated conversation unfold. Her fists clench at her sides as anger rises within her. She had come all this way for Diego, for their children, only to see him being torn apart by this American woman. She walks toward the front door, her emotions spilling over. She knows that she must confront Diego before it's too late. Katerina steps inside the mansion, her footsteps heavy as she moves toward the living room. She sees Diego standing at the door with a pained expression on his face. His shoulders slump, the weight of the confrontation with Jennifer evident in his posture. Katerina stands in the doorway, her eyes hardening as she approaches him. Katerina, snapping, voice filled with fury. Did you really think you could have both of us, Diego? That you could keep me in the shadows while you played house with her? Diego turns, his face filled with regret. Diego, I never wanted any of this to happen. But Katerina, this situation, it's not as simple as you think. Katerina steps closer, her chest heaving with anger. No, Diego, you don't get to make excuses. I've given up everything to be here. I came across the border, I fought for us, and now you're letting her take you away from me? Diego looks down, his eyes filled with conflict. He wants to make it right, but the situation is too complicated. I'm sorry, Katerina. I never meant for you to suffer like this, but I'm not sure what to do anymore. Katerina's eyes flash with rage. She's had enough of waiting, of being patient. Her desperation takes over, and her voice rises in a near shout. Katerina, you think I'm going to sit here and let her take you from me? I won't. Before Diego can react, Katerina storms out of the room, her heels clicking against the floor with each step. She heads straight for the stairs, determined to confront Jennifer. Jennifer is standing by the grand staircase, her back turned, staring out of the large windows at the view of the mansion's sprawling grounds. Her mind races with all that has happened, the lies, the betrayal, the heartbreak. She needs space, but there's no escape from the chaos she feels inside. Suddenly, Katerina bursts into the room, her fury still boiling over. Without a word, she strides toward Jennifer, her eyes locked onto her target. Katerina, you think you can take him from me? You think you can destroy everything I've fought for? Jennifer spins around, her eyes wide with shock at the sudden attack. Before she can say anything, Katerina lunges at her, grabbing her by the arm and shoving her toward the stairs. Jennifer, panicked, stop! Get away from me! In the struggle, Katerina loses her balance and shoves Jennifer harder than she intended. Jennifer stumbles back, her heels slipping on the marble floor. She reaches out for the banister, but it's too late. With a horrifying scream, Jennifer tumbles down the stairs, crashing onto the hard floor below. The room falls silent. Katerina stands frozen, her eyes wide in horror as she realizes what has just happened. She didn't mean for it to go this far. Jennifer lies motionless at the bottom of the stairs, blood pooling around her head. Katerina kneels beside Jennifer, her hands trembling as she reaches out to touch her, but she knows it's too late. In her anger, she has killed the one person who stood between her and Diego. Panicked, Katerina looks around as if searching for an escape, but it's too late. The sirens wail in the distance, and she knows that everything is about to unravel. The tension in the mansion is suffocating. Katerina stands over Jennifer's lifeless body, her hands shaking as the realization of what she's done starts to sink in. Blood stains the marble floor, a stark contrast to the pristine luxury of the mansion. Her heart races, and her breaths are quick and shallow. For a moment, she stands frozen, the enormity of the situation overwhelming her. She never intended for this to happen, but the anger, the jealousy, the betrayal, it all exploded at once. Katerina's hands tremble as she reaches down to touch Jennifer's body, but she pulls away, realizing the finality of it. She made a mistake, a terrible mistake. The door to the mansion swings open, and a voice echoes from the entryway. Diego, shouting from the hall, Katerina, what happened? What did you do? Katerina freezes, panic setting in. She hears Diego's footsteps growing louder, and her mind races. She's trapped. There's no way to undo this. She can't hide what she's done. Desperate, Katerina quickly looks around, but she knows there's no escaping now. As she stands there, paralyzed, she hears a distant sound, siren wails growing louder and louder, drawing closer to the mansion. Katerina's stomach drops. She didn't call the police. She didn't make any noise, didn't scream. So who could have possibly alerted them? Flashback to earlier in the evening. As Katerina and Jennifer were arguing, a neighbor, who happened to hear the raised voices through the walls, decided to call the authorities, concerned about the commotion. The neighbor was familiar with Jennifer, having seen her in the neighborhood frequently. Unaware of the full details of the argument, but alarmed by the intensity of it, the neighbor made the call to 911. At the present, as Katerina's mind flashes with dread, she hadn't anticipated this turn of events. The sirens are now unmistakable. The police are closing in. Katerina stumbles back from the body, her mind overwhelmed by a mixture of guilt and fear. She doesn't know how to explain this. The sound of the sirens cuts through the air like a knife, signaling the end of everything. Diego bursts into the room, his face pale and wide-eyed with horror as he takes in the scene. He looks from Jennifer to Katerina, his voice filled with disbelief. Diego, shocked. Katerina, no, what have you done? Katerina takes a step back, her hands raised in an almost instinctive gesture of defense. Frantically, almost whispering, I didn't mean to. I didn't mean for this to happen, Diego. The sirens grow louder. The sound of heavy footsteps approaching the door makes Katerina's heart race even faster. She can't stay here. She can't be caught. But before she can move, the front door bursts open and officers rush in, their guns drawn. The moment of no return has arrived. Katerina is grabbed by two officers and swiftly placed under arrest. Officer 1. Ma'am, you're under arrest for the murder of Jennifer Harris. Anything you say can and will be used against you. Katerina's world collapses as she is cuffed and dragged toward the door. Her heart is pounding in her chest. She looks over at Diego, who stands frozen, his face full of pain and confusion. Diego? Katerina, what have you done? Katerina doesn't respond, her eyes glazed over as she is pushed toward the patrol car outside. The weight of the situation finally crashes down on her, and her body goes limp, the realization that she's lost everything sinking in. Diego stands in the middle of the room, his mind in turmoil. He looks down at Jennifer's lifeless form, the finality of it settling over him. She's gone, and it's all his fault. The officers are securing Katerina in the back of the police car. As the car door slams shut, the sirens blare once more, signaling the beginning of the end. Hours later, Diego is sitting in the living room of the mansion, his head in his hands. The police have finished their investigation, and the mansion is eerily quiet. The echo of the sirens is still ringing in his ears, and the weight of everything that's happened is crushing him. The detective assigned to the case approaches him, a solemn expression on his face. He sits down next to Diego, offering him a moment of silence before speaking. Mr. Ruiz, I know this is a difficult time, but we need your statement. It's important we gather all the facts. Diego looks up, his eyes bloodshot from crying, his face a mask of despair. Diego softly, I never thought this would happen. I never thought Katerina would. I thought I could fix it, but I was wrong. He chokes back a sob and stands, walking over to Jennifer's body one last time, his hand hovering over her but not touching her. Whispering to himself, she didn't deserve this. No one deserved this. The detective watches him with sympathy, but stays focused on the task at hand. Detective, Mr. Ruiz, we have to ask. Did you know that Katerina was capable of violence? Did she show any signs of aggression? Diego takes a deep breath and shakes his head, his thoughts racing. He had known Katerina was volatile, but he never thought she was capable of something like this. No, she was angry, but I never imagined it would come to this. Diego, as he stares at Jennifer's body, the weight of the tragedy sinking in, he knows that his life will never be the same again. And all the hope he once had, all the dreams he thought were within reach, have now been shattered beyond repair. Katerina sitting in the back of a police car, her face pale and emotionless. The night is quiet outside, but the weight of her actions is suffocating her. The flashing lights from the police vehicles illuminate her face, casting an eerie glow. As the car moves toward the station, Katerina stares out the window, lost in thought. Never in my life did I think I would end up like this. A life built on hope, on the belief that love could make everything better. And now, everything's gone. Diego, my family, the life we were supposed to have. Her eyes fill with tears, but there's no sound, only the hum of the police car's engine. The camera cuts to her handcuffed hands resting in her lap. She takes a deep breath and looks straight ahead, knowing she can't escape the reality of what she's done. Back at Jennifer's mansion, Diego stands alone in the grand living room. The detective has left, and the house is eerily silent. He's alone with his thoughts, his guilt, and the aftermath of the tragic events. He looks around the mansion, his once glamorous surroundings now feeling cold and empty. Diego walks toward the back door, stepping into the backyard. Diego, I never wanted this. I never wanted her to die. I thought if I played along with Jennifer, if I just kept her happy for a while, everything would be okay. But now... Diego stops in the middle of the yard, staring up at the sky. The weight of his decisions presses on him. He wanted a better life, but now it feels like he's lost everything. To a bustling newsroom. A reporter stands in front of a camera, a serious expression on her face. The headlines run across the screen. Reporter, breaking news. Wealthy entrepreneur Jennifer Harris has been found dead in her luxury home in what police are calling a violent incident. The prime suspect in her death is her partner, Diego Ruiz, who has been taken into custody. Ruiz's wife, Katerina Ruiz, was also arrested at the scene after a heated altercation led to the tragic incident. Police are investigating the details of the case, but sources close to the investigation suggest that Ruiz may have been involved in a web of deceit. The scene quickly shifts to the interior of a cafe in a local town. People are sitting, gossiping about the case. The news of Jennifer's death is spreading like wildfire. Man 1, whispering to a friend, I heard Diego was living with her, but he had a wife back in Mexico. Can you believe that? And now she's dead. He must have been using her for her money. Man 2, his head. Sounds like something went wrong. Those rich people always causing trouble. And this Katerina, she must have been jealous. She was living a whole other life back in Mexico. Woman at the table. And what about the kids? What's going to happen to them? The scene shifts back to Diego, still standing outside, as the gossip spreads through the community. His heart aches as he imagines what will happen to his children, his wife, and everything he has worked so hard to protect. Weeks later, the trial is in full swing. The courtroom is packed with reporters, the public, and family members. Diego sits in the defendant's seat, his head bowed, the weight of the charges against him overwhelming. Katerina, seated behind him, stares ahead, her face emotionless. The courtroom is tense, filled with hushed whispers and the shuffling of papers. The judge calls for silence, and the trial begins. Diego's lawyer rises to present the defense. Lawyer, calmly, the court, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my client, Diego Ruiz, is not guilty of the murder of Jennifer Harris. Yes, a tragic incident occurred in the home of Miss Harris, but there is no evidence to suggest that Diego Ruiz was directly responsible for her death. My client was not involved in any premeditated attack. This was a moment of conflict and heat, and the real culprit here is the overwhelming sense of betrayal that led to this unfortunate outcome. The camera cuts to Katerina, who shifts uncomfortably in her seat, avoiding eye contact with Diego. She knows that everything will depend on her testimony, but she feels a deep conflict inside. Her heart wants to protect her family, but she knows the truth. Katerina's testimony. Katerina is called to the stand. The room falls silent as she rises, her hands trembling as she walks toward the witness box. The prosecutor addresses her. Mrs. Ruiz, can you tell the court exactly what happened the night of Jennifer Harris's death? Katerina hesitates for a long moment before speaking. Her voice cracks as she begins her testimony. It all happened so fast. I found out about Diego's affair with Jennifer. I found out that he was living with her, and I wanted to confront him. I thought that if I came to the house, I could get him back. I never thought it would go that far. She looks down at her hands, clearly struggling with her emotions. When I saw them together, when I saw Jennifer with Diego, I couldn't take it. I never meant to hurt her. I just wanted to talk to him, to fix things, to bring him home. But I lost control. The courtroom is silent as Katerina's words hang in the air. Diego's eyes meet hers, full of pain and regret. He knows that she's speaking the truth, but it's too late now. The damage has been done. The verdict. The jury deliberates for hours, and finally, the courtroom doors open. The jury files in, their expressions grave. The judge calls for silence. Judge, the jury reached a verdict. We have, Your Honor. We find the defendant, Katerina Ruiz guilty of manslaughter in the death of Jennifer Harris. The courtroom erupts in murmurs, some people shaking their heads in disbelief. Katerina's face goes pale as the words hit her like a punch to the gut. Judge, addressing Katerina. Mrs. Ruiz, you will be sentenced to 10 years in prison for your role in this tragedy. Katerina's world crumbles around her as she is escorted from the courtroom in handcuffs. She didn't expect it to end this way, but now it's over. Scene 17, Diego's repatriation. The final scene shows Diego standing in an immigration detention center, looking out the window. His face is hard with regret, his heart aching. The phone rings, and the officer on the other end tells him the inevitable. Officer on the phone. Mr. Ruiz, you've been deported. You will be returned to Mexico immediately. Diego hangs up the phone and looks around the sterile room, his heart heavy with loss. He thinks about his family, his children, and the life that he will never return to. He walks out of the detention center, his gaze fixed on the horizon. The camera zooms out, showing him walking toward a bus station that will take him back to Mexico. Diego, I came to America to build a future, but in the end I've lost everything. My family, my freedom, my dreams. The end.
Thank you for joining us on this unforgettable journey through Diego's Secret. We hope you felt the drama, love, heartbreak, and suspense that made this story come alive. Your support means the world to us, and we can't wait to share more Captivat.